Yo, what up? It's Donut, and you tuning in to all your Illuminati news. And we are here. I am so grateful to be here with Courtenay Turner. I am such a huge fan of yours, Courtenay, and your research, especially in Game B. I learned about you through Matt Era and Cynthia Chung.
Great.
Then I started following you over on the Twitter, and I mean, absolutely mind blown by your research, your presentation. I got all of Courtenay's links down below. How are you?
I'm doing well, thank you.
It's great to see you. I'm like a fan over here. So fan, I've been.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Can
I
you
appreciate
tell
it.
the audience maybe a little bit about your work and the topics you've been diving into recently?
Yeah, sure. So I'll give you kind of a really quick overview of how I got into this. I always say that I was very late to the party. It was like I was scrambling trying to find the train station, and I found the high speed rail, and I was super excited, but I'm still scrambling to catch up. But so that's kind of how it's felt over the past 4 years. But for those who don't know my story, I was born with kind of a unique set of circumstances. I'm visually impaired. I'm hearing impaired. I I had heart surgery when I was a year old. My growth was stunted. I had fine graphic motor impairment, all sorts of challenges. They literally told my mom the best she could hope was find a nice institution for me to spend my life. Fortunately, I, exceeded their expectations. Very, very grateful for that. But in 2020, I found myself really struggling. I didn't realize because I learned how to speak by reading lips. And I didn't get hearing aids till I was almost 6 years old. So I was mostly depending on nonverbal communication, in order to communicate. And I didn't realize how much I still depended on all of that until all the coping mechanisms I spent my whole life developing were then stripped from me by a cloth that everybody was wearing over their face. So,
Oh,
yeah.
wow. Wow,
So
that must have been wild.
I found myself really depressed. I don't want to, you know, I don't want to make light of it. I don't want to be melodramatic either. But I was really depressed. I was completely isolated. I couldn't communicate with people. I would drag a friend of mine an hour and a half away to go for a hike, so that we didn't have to fear being arrested for being on a mountain, just the two of us. Because there's basically nobody else on the mountain. But somehow we're, a threat, just our breath, because we didn't have it covered. But just so that I could see a naked face and have conversations. And so this is the state I was in. And so when I remember, I think it was March 18th, they had closed everything down, and I found myself, I had gotten fired from both of the gyms I was working at the time. I was a CrossFit coach, and I was also an aerial acrobatic performer. So I would do speeches, mostly motivational speeches, talking about movement as like a not really just talking about. Most people talk about the physiological benefits, the psychological, mental, mitigating Alzheimer's and cognitive decline, all that great stuff. I really talked about it philosophically, how movement is a metaphor for life, using your physical training as a teacher to overcome adversity life. And I would use my personal story as a testimony to that. And I did the aerial performances to show people what was possible when nobody thought it was. And also because it was really fun and I loved it. So, but all of
Amazing.
those obviously got canceled, and I got fired from both of my gyms. I can't prove it, but I'm 99.9 repeating sure that it was over political reasons. And so the first day that the lockdowns hit, I stared at a computer for 10 hours thinking I was going to write a masterpiece. And at the end of the day, I had a white screen, a beautiful blank white screen staring back at me. And I decided this might not be the best time. I was just too depressed, too anxious. Then, you can't force that kind of creative process in that kind of an emotional state. So I decided to order some books. I thought, well, now I have some time to read, until I figure out what I'm going to do. And, I wasn't alone in that. A lot of people were trying to figure out what they were going to do. But I was trying to figure out what I was going to do. I ordered 11 books and I started reading a lot. And then I started posting about some of the things I was reading, some of my opinions. And of course, I was still reading all these medical journals. And I didn't expect any of what I posted to be controversial. But, you can post an orange on social media and people will argue with you and tell you it's an apple. I don't know how this works, but it's just kind of evidence speaks for itself. So it seems to be how social media works. And so I had a couple of people who tell me that I should start a podcast. And at the time, I really had no idea what podcasts were. I never listened. I was just not immersed in this world at all. And and then somebody had heard my story and he said, "You need to be on Rogan." And I said, "What's a Rogan? Why do I need to be on it?" I mean, this is how clueless I was to the podcasting world. So I started investigating a little bit, doing a little bit of research. I got very tied into the intellectual dark web and I started consuming a lot of that material. And they kind of kept me company on my long hikes and runs because I spent a lot of time doing that, trying to just get some air when we were locked down. And so what I did was I committed to 6 months of recording, and I would approach people and I told them I might not actually air any of them, that this was just going to be an experiment. I really just wanted the opportunity to have naked face conversations, even if it was through a digital interface. And so I did for 6 months, and the guests seemed to really enjoy it. So I was like, okay, maybe I'll try airing it. And people seem to enjoy it. I found that it might save my life. And so here we are several years later. And
Wow.
the trajectory has been interesting because, I started off the podcast very immersed in kind of the medical freedom space, very politically oriented. I kind of had this, in hindsight, it seems naive. I had this thought that if we could just get the right people in office, we could fix this whole mess. And now locally, I still have some hope for that. But, I think that the system is a little bit more complicated than that, to be honest. And I thought that, the Republicans looked like they were behaving as controlled opposition for the left. And then I was like, no, I think a few months later, I said, no, they were created to be controlled opposition for the left. And so that kind of, and then I think it was December of 2020. A friend of mine had sent me this video of Dr. John Coleman doing his Committee of 300 speech. And he said, "Have you ever heard of him? Have you ever seen this?" And I said, "No." And he said, "Okay, watch this and call me back." So I did. And we were on the phone until 5 a.m. And it sent me down the rabbit hole. I started looking into all of his books. And I found that the Tavistock book that he wrote, Tavistock Institute of Human Relations, shaping the moral, social, political decline of the United States, although it used to be and Great Britain, that seems to have been truncated from the title. But when I first
Oh,
looked it up,
wow. I didn't know that.
yeah, when I
Makes
first
sense.
very interesting. When I first looked it up on Amazon, it was retailing for almost $4,000. And that was a bit out of my price range. Yeah, it's there right on that bottom right corner. So I read it online. I know that, we shouldn't pirate books, but I don't have $4,000 to spend on a book. So that's what I did. And I read it 3 times in a week. I was just riveted. And now they're selling it for, I think, $25 plus shipping. And they have changed the title. I don't know if they've changed anything in it. I did buy the book now that it's an affordable price, since this is something I've referenced so often. Now I've read a lot more on Tavistock. I've done quite a deep dive on that research, but most of the stuff that I read about Tavistock is really from the psychologists themselves. It's from Tavistock members directly.
Oh, that makes sense. That makes sense. Because I read the one Tavistock book called the Tavistock Institute. I don't know who wrote it, but it
Okay.
seemed to be, it's this one right here.
Daniel Estulin. That's Daniel Estulin.
Okay. It
And
was
he's
all
close
like
to Coleman quite a bit.
they worked together.
Mm-mm. No, but he cites Coleman a lot in that book. I think that was a large basis for his research was Coleman's work.
I remember reading this and it
Mhm.
was all like awesome and solid. And then at the very end, it said something. I was like, what the heck? How they were like, Vladimir Putin unplugged from the brain chip, which he got the USB drive for. So his whole soldiers were like unplugged from it. I was like, that's ridiculous. And then learning about the seventh, eighth, ninth industrial revolution that you've covered. I'm like, maybe that did happen, hijacking auras and all that, wild stuff. So,
Oh yeah, the soul catcher technology,
soul
right?
capture technology. Yeah, you just posted about that on Twitter.
Yes. So that's been very interesting. So more recently, so Tavistock was like kind of a big light bulb moment for me, and I did do a lot of my early research was really centered around that, and it was just a kind of a convergence of so many things I was immersed in. I had a strong academic background in both psychology, philosophy, and then I
Oh,
was in the entertainment and acting industry. Yeah. So,
well,
yeah, I
that,
had done several independent studies in high school on philosophy. My high school actually published my Socrates paper. I then did 2 independent studies on dream analysis in high school. They were like dissertations, literally. I had to do, field work, present before a panel of neuropsychiatrists. Most of them were from Columbia Presbyterian. I actually presented my original research I wanted to conduct. They told me that I would need an MD, PhD to conduct the study because it was a human brain study. And they said, but if you do, it would likely be statistically significant. You'd probably get a Nobel Prize. And so, of course, I thought that's what I should do. And they told me, don't bother because by the time you go through your schooling, we'll have already done the research and we'll have already done that for you. I was like, wow, so you're just going to take a 15-year-old idea and run with it. I realized it was kind of ludicrous because, I mean, the analogy I always use is like, you don't need to know how to code to be a software engineer CEO, right? A software company CEO, sorry. And it's the same thing. It's not like I was going to conduct the actual brain study. I'd be overseeing I laid out the blueprint for the study. The doctors and the neuroscientists would have been the ones, doing the surgery and actually conducting it. So it was kind of silly in hindsight, but yeah, I just, so I had started as a neuroscience major in college, but I switched to philosophy. And then I was in the entertainment industry and I was an actress and a producer. So Tavistock kind of like, I realized how much it impacted all of those areas. So it's
mm,
really fascinating to me.
yeah.
But
Yeah,
yeah.
I mean, even philosophy, psychology is deep into the way that films are made, even if they're
Yeah.
creative or if they're propaganda pieces. And I think that's so cool. And I think you got such a solid foundation with having like the real wicked smart research, I like to call it. And then entering into in 2020 the committee of 300, because you go over like really, really deep work that's not easy to stumble across. So that's definitely awesome. And your story of the uh, the body language is really cool. I was in therapy for a while holistically
Mhm.
in recovery, and my therapist told me like to walk around more because like energy and motion sort of like we're like water and it makes you feel better sort of. So
Mhm.
I was doing that, and that body language is also like 80-90% of communication too. So I didn't know that about you. That's really cool.
Thank you. Yeah, so more recently, I've been diving into, as you saw, this game bee stuff, and that's kind of
Mhm.
led me into this technocracy stuff, which is super scary. And it's also fascinating, but it is terrifying. And that led me into some of this, biodigital convergence stuff. And I have to say, yeah, I started posting some of it on Twitter, and there is a group that is into this research, and they are some of the most vicious. I, I think the only conclusion I can draw is they must be an op
Mhm.
designed to gatekeep the information, because I don't know why else. Like, I would be a bridge because they're already in their echo chamber and they're already really deep into this research, right? They know this stuff. So I would think they'd want to bridge the gap to people who are not as versed with it, and that's what I would be doing. But they have done nothing but like attack me, criticize me, harass me.
Mhm.
I think they found the soul catcher post. It might have been another post, and they just jumped on. And I'm like, okay. So after this incessant barrage, and it's a swarm. And that's also really strange behavior. So I was like, okay, I think this is an op, and I think it's designed to discredit and gatekeep. I do think the technology is real, not all of it. So I think some of it is still in theoretical phases, and I think
Right.
some of it is further along than we know.
What
So
is it?
well, it's a lot of things, but this soul catcher thing is that they think they can capture your soul, and I don't know if they really can capture your soul. Makes it a little bit vague. This particular article, but this is that where they're saying they can essentially. We know they can photograph your aura. So I think they're essentially saying they can photograph like your, like the various. Yeah, that's the auras. But in this one, they're talking about like, the electromagnetic biofield. And I'm sure that there are some aspects of that they can capture, that they can quantify to some degree. But that's not quite the same thing as saying that they can really, you know, capture your soul. I'm
Yeah,
not really sure that that's 100% accurate, but I think they want us to think that. I'm trying to look it up right now. Um,
sure. Yeah,
but
no, that makes total sense. And yeah, I know what you're talking about too, but with the pushback, it could be a control thing because I only get pushback when I talk about certain topics. Everyone loves me until I bring up a certain topic, and then I get a flood of people. Like recently in my last video, I was showing how I showed like the symbols,
Mhm,
hand gestures, and they were completely accurate. Uh, but like if I talk about Elon, or I just get a
mhm.
bunch of people just, oh, donuts fake, donuts this, donuts that, and I'm just like, what is going on here? But thank you for sharing that because it really makes me like, oh, okay, yeah, these are just. Uh, I don't know if they're called engagement farms or bot farms, but it could
I
just
think
be.
it's a combination. I think some of them are bots.
Mhm.
I can kind of tell from the language, like the syntax isn't quite normal, and it doesn't sound like somebody who speaks another language trying to write in English. It's like the syntax is off. So I think some of them are bots, and then I think some of them are paid ops. Like they're
Sure.
just they're literal ops designed to gatekeep, to discredit. Yeah, and to harass those who might be able to bridge the gap with this information. But yeah, so the soul catcher stuff, I think, is at the end of the article they talk about reincarnation. We don't have, this is no disrespect to people who believe in it, but we don't have any like quantifiable evidence on that. So they're kind of alluding to it. But there are other technologies that they definitely do have. This whole stuff with the Internet of Nanobio things is very real. And there are several universities where they're training college students and higher level education in this field of Internet of Nanobio things. And this one is really creepy because I think this is exactly where they're going. And when I look at Game B and the network state, this makes perfect sense that you would have these, essentially the cryptocurrency tied to this. Um,
Right. Especially with all the new Stargate. This is where it's heading.
yeah,
Erval Harari or whatever from the WEF says it's planning for the 2050 singularity. And
yes,
I just finished Matt Ehret's book that Cynthia Chung was on as well, and they were pointing out like the Malthusian point of crisis.
yep.
This, and it's the exact same as the singularity. So it's like this is an old plan going back to Malthus, and as you pointed out, probably way before. But it's just like the same graph, and that point of crisis will be this, where they're aiming for 2050. That WEF Herval Nervari or whatever her name is. But you were pointing out that the 2045 they have
Yes.
the UN vision. So it's like all leading to this
So
technocracy.
yeah, there's a couple of 2045. So right, there's the AI World Society. This is the UN 100 plan. That right, it's right there. UN 100. Scroll down a little bit more on the bottom right there. Yeah, UN 100. So this is a project in conjunction with the Boston Global Forum and the centennial of the UN, their vision for 2045, and that would be 100-year centennial of the UN. And Boston Global Forum, with Michael Dukakis, is helming this. He was the former governor of Massachusetts. He wrote a book called Remaking the World Towards the Age of Global Enlightenment, very much a new age kind of nod. And it is this vision for an artificial world society. And they say that 2045 will be the year when this emerges. And they actually have on their website, they have this letter. I put it in many of my podcasts, where because they are theosophists and they believe that they
Right.
channel ascended masters. So they have somebody come from the future in 2075 and they say that it's the year 2045. And they talk about how grateful they are that they brought this, this AI world society and why we need this technology. And but then there's also, so in Game B, in a journey to Game B, that Jim Rutt, who's kind of the grandfather of Game B, he writes this Medium article, and it's like a blueprint for Game B. Yeah, this is another one, an invitation to Game B, but
I was
the one
trying to find it. It wasn't
yeah.
popping up. I've seen it from A to B, that one.
No, it's another one. It's
Oh,
a journey to Game B, and it's kind of like
okay.
this blueprint. And in it, he says 2045 will be like the pre-Game B. That's like when it really emerges. So that's interesting. And then we also have Ray Kurzweil and his new
Mhm.
book, The Singularity is Nearer. And he says the singularity will be in 2045. So there seems to be a lot invested in this year 2045 being the singularity. And all of these things really do point to this notion. It is a Malthusian worldview that lays the presuppositions for it, but it's very much in the vein of Teilhard de Chardin's noosphere, right? It's this idea of, they have different terms. Game B calls it the collective conscious, of the collective intelligence. Of course, Jung called it collective unconscious. But it's this idea that the world brain, exactly, H.G. Wells' world brain. And it's this idea that we will have, this collective global brain. And they really do envision that technology is what's going to create this global brain. Bruce Lipton, he's an evolutionary leader, and I've shown this diagram. It's from one of his speeches in a bunch of my podcasts as well, where he has the Hegelian dialectical spiral. And he talks about how, we started out with amoeba, and amoeba were these single cell organisms, and they collect their intelligence from their membrane. And then we evolve. And, when we get to humans, they're these complex multicellular organisms. But the reason they're so intelligent is because they have so much surface area of membrane. And he says, now we have the option to co-create, and then we can make the choice to evolve and into the superorganism of humanity. There'll be a superorganism of humanity. Otherwise, we're going to go extinct. But if we choose to evolve into a superorganism of humanity, he says, what will be the membrane then? Why, of course, it's the internet. So when you look at all of these things that they're talking about, it's one thing when you envision the internet now. This is part of what sent me down the biodigital convergence rabbit hole. They don't like when I use the term rabbit hole. They tell me that means I'm an op because it was coined by the Freemasons. And I'm like, okay, but it's really pretty common vernacular. This is like colloquial language at this point. I don't think everybody who uses that term personally.
Everybody's such a tyrant, like,
I
wanna
know.
control everything. Yeah,
I'm like, I don't think most people even know that the Freemasons coined that term, and I
I
don't
didn't
think
know that.
yeah,
Yeah,
like,
and I'll
it's
be
just
looking at all the
absurd.
Freemason stuff. That's wild.
And
So
I
this,
don't think most people like using it are offs, but it sent me down
yeah,
that trail. It sent me, looking in that direction, because when you start looking, it's one thing when you look at the internet now. I mean, it's pretty advanced. We already do have a sense of shared intelligence to some degree. People consult the oracle, quote unquote, Google, and now we have the various learning language models, right? The LMs and like ChatGPT and now DeepSeek, right? And so we already have a degree of that. But when we get to Web3,
mm,
now things get uh, a little bit murky in terms of what they envision, because they really do envision that it's going to involve hacking humans. as you all know, Harari would say. And I think there's a lot of evidence to indicate they've already done this to some extent. I think they've done it in much more testing arenas. I don't know that this is full scale yet. I don't see any evidence for that, but I do think that it is in testing phases. It wouldn't be in universities as a curriculum if they weren't past, the theoretical model. And there are a lot of white papers showing that they have already done, experiments, and the technology is very much viable. But Web3, they talk a lot about using the biofield. They talk about 6G technology, which will be powered by humans. And this is a very easily accessible article from a scientific journal from University of Amherst, Massachusetts, where they talk about humans powering 6G, and that in the AI World Society, they talk about using that for the Internet of Nanobio things. So, yeah, things get interesting.
Wow, yeah, it's just like in the movie The Matrix, which I think
Yep.
Matt was pointing out how it was like just the Gnostic religion belief, but like
Yep.
how they're in the womb, and the womb actually means matrix, and like a lot of these cults go back into like the womb, into the ground, going back to like these Gaia cults, and they words, they're like, it's hypnosis. Like with marketing, you show the Coca-Cola commercial even though everyone knows what Coca-Cola is, over and over again, and they seem to use these certain words. You brought up like Bruce Limpton, that we co-create. You were
Yeah.
kind of touching on that, how you just hear this word over, co-create, man, co-create with me. It's like a hypnosis technique
Yep.
too,
It is. Yeah.
that we
And I mean that the co-create, I think one of the, she didn't create the term, but she very much, I think, codified and popularized it, would be Barbara Marx Hubbard. And
oh,
yeah, and when you speak of meditation, right, she's behind HeartMath, which is largely used for meditation, and they talk about creating global coherence through this HeartMath technology using the heart resonance. And now they're talking about doing heart brain coherence, global coherence. And that's a little disturbing to me, because it's one thing for you to use this app to help like meditate, relax, and I think it has some fairly benign usages. But when they start talking about creating global coherence through heart brain coherence, and when you look at the emerging technologies, they have the capacity to do that sort of thing, and some of it is consensual, and some of it really isn't. Like, it
and
doesn't
her
have.
name, like having Marx in it, we see this woke right agenda pushing Marxism. I've been pointing that out for a while because of the
Oh, yeah.
great researchers, and I'm so happy that it's like catching on. How like the National Socialists are socialists, like it's all like heading, it's like all going down the
Can we
same
get
rabbit
rid
hole.
of the idea that they're even on the right? Like, I mean, I remember when I first started the podcast, I did a bunch of podcasts on this, because remember Antifa, like in 2020?
Exactly, it's the
I
same
was like,
thing.
they're not right wing. Fascists are not on the right.
Yeah, no, for sure. Yeah. And my friend, he went to one of these Antifa protests, and they were protesting him, and they're like, he's a fascist. And I was all like, oh no, he's like a Nazi. And I was like, you do know that the Nazis were socialists. Like it was like, it
The
really,
National
really,
Socialist Workers Party, yeah,
yeah.
that one.
And which all stems from like some theosophy, Thule, beatnik kind of.
Ariosophy, yeah.
And Barbara Marx
Very
Hubbard,
awful.
I'm happy you brought her up, because you're actually, I think, the first person to talk about her. I've been looking into her for a while because the name Hubbard, you got L. Ron Hubbard, Marx in there, and she was brought up in looking into like the Esalen Institute, and John C. Lilly's, who I'm really obsessed with for a while. I don't know if you ever heard of him, but he did the dolphin research with drugs, and going down into the tanks and communicating with the dolphins, funded by the government. And he wrote this book called The Biocomputer,
Mhm.
that the human as a computer through the autonomic nervous system. And that's what I think's happening with the
Yep.
mushrooms. Like, why is everybody pushing mushrooms right now? The Wall Street Journal, but they did this on Life magazine, which is
They have
Henry.
it on children's clothing. I mean,
Oh, good point.
and furniture. I'm sorry, when did mushrooms become like aesthetically pleasing? Like, this is how you know it's an op. I mean, why is it a fashion statement? Why is it in furniture? I see these lamps that are mushrooms. I see tables, like coffee tables. It's everywhere. They're pushing this like in your face. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And Life magazine like brought it in first, and that's also Henry Luce, Knights of Malta, Skull and Bones, like all
Uh-huh.
these JP Morgan, like all pushing everybody. So I think it's all connected for sure.
I think so too.
Can you tell me a little bit more and us about Game B? Because I thought it was so fascinating. I never heard of this term. Why haven't we heard of this term, Game B?
So this is really interesting because it's not new, right? So it started in around 2011, and Jim Rutt held what he called the Stanton meeting, Stanton, Virginia, and this is the Game B wiki that you have up on there. And yes, an invitation to Game B is what he called the film, and the film is actually pretty recent. I think it was 2022 where they did this movie, an invitation to Game B. And here he's talking about it. But in 2011, he tried to start something called the Emancipation Party, and got a group of a lot of evolutionary biologists together. Various kind of systems theory people. He was chairman of Santa Fe Institute, which is kind of like the Midwest Esalen in a way. And they study complexity theory, systems theory. So it's kind of in that cybernetics type realm. And he's also a tech investor. So one of his big companies was Network Solutions, so like domain names and that sort of thing. And he starts this, he's trying to launch this Emancipation Party back in 2011. And he had some big names who were not well known at the time, but one of them I know will be very familiar. His name is Brett Weinstein. And he was at these Stanton meetings with Jim Rutt. And the platform for this party was very much in the Bernie Sanders vein. It was, they wanted a UBI, they wanted universal health care. They wanted some sort of a reform tax program. It was very like socialist agenda. Uh,
Mhm.
but they had a really hard time launching it. So Jim Rutt explains that the boomers were all on board, but that you can't really feasibly launch a political movement with the boomers. So he tried to get Gen X on board, and he said he thought that they could be corralled, but they weren't quite all in. But he really had difficulty with the millennials. He said the millennials were ironically the most in favor of the platform. So he actually posted, even really recently, a few weeks ago on Twitter, he posted the link for the reforms that the Emancipation Party was trying to bring forth. And he said that the millennials love the agenda, but that they were such anarchists that the idea of a political party was anathema to them. And so he couldn't get it off the ground. And there was someone named Thor Mueller, who was part of this group at the Stanton meeting, and told him they were mulling around this concept of a social operating system for civilization called Game B. And he said that they should keep Game B for branding purposes and keep going with Game B. So they kind of abandoned this Emancipation Party idea, but they kept going with Game B. And this was back in 2011. The way Jim Rutt explains it, he has his own podcast, and he's done countless podcasts with these Game B thought leaders. And he's talked quite a bit about it and shared the stories. And he talks about how some of them were a little bit more, he uses the term like more spiritually minded, I guess more woo-woo. And he's a hard scientist, although I would argue maybe scientific dictatorship. I don't know about hard science,
Hmm.
but this is kind of like utopian techno fascism. It's kind of what it's like. But he said, so that was kind of the schism in the group. And you see that a little bit as they start emerging. But I guess it was really during 2020 where they started, and I've noticed that with a lot of these things. Actually, there's a lot of what they call transpolitical movements, and the Emancipation Party, I would argue, is one of these transpolitical movements. But there's like the One People, One Nation. There's Christopher Life's United Independent Party, and these are all claiming to be outside of the two-party paradigm. And not to say that there aren't flaws with the two-party paradigm, even that George Washington warned us against it, and warned that it would be a loophole for foreign entanglement. And he didn't use the term Hegelian dialectical weaponization, but that's essentially what he alluded to. And I think we see that today. So it's not that I disagree with that premise, but this transpolitical movement really does seem to be a utopian socialist movement. And we see a lot of it. And it's interesting because in the independent sphere, I call it the indie sphere. It's kind of different from like the independent. And I do differentiate between the two of those. But in the indie sphere, we see a lot of these people who claim to be outside that two-party duopoly. And a lot of them are promoting something that looks like these transpolitical kind of movements that are much more socialist leaning. And a lot of them do actually come from the left. So even though they say they don't support the right or the left, they attack the right much more than they attack the left. And most of them come from the left. So I just think that's interesting when you're
and like they're born into like really like high-end political families and of socialists too. I've noticed like it's really strange stuff. A lot of the influencers and all that.
Yep. Yes, exactly.
Yeah. It's wild. And here's your website. Everybody, I would like to remind everybody to smash that like button and go over to Courtenay's channel. I got those links down below. Go get the Twitter. If you want to get smart, you go to that Twitter, you go to that Rumble, go to that link tree, get all of this. And right now, you've just posted so many different topics. I don't know where your like mind is at, because I cover the Knights of Malta, the Templars, symbolism. This game B is just like blowing me away, and I wanted to hear a lot about it. But where's your mind at right now? What are you diving into?
So I'm still doing more research. I have been involved in the school choice. Of course, they rammed it through, and now Trump is, supporting it nationally. I'm beyond disgusted with this. And they laid out this plan, and they said it would be the conservatives and the right-wing movement that would usher it in. And that is exactly what's happening. And it makes me sick that these so-called conservatives, they call themselves conservatives, and they're championing the UN agenda, literally. So that whole thing is just beyond disturbing and disgusting to me. They're being paid off to do it, and it's really, really sickening.
And what is it?
What is it?
Yeah,
School choice. So it's this idea that they use the term choice to make it sound like it really appeals to, freedom-minded people, but it's really about making all schools public schools, because they're giving vouchers, and we know whatever the government funds, it runs. So you're now going to get government strings attached even to homeschoolers. And when you read the plans of Alice Bailey, who inspired Robert Mueller, who worked for the UN for 40 years and wrote the World Core curriculum based on Alice Bailey's externalization of the hierarchy and her book on education. And this is an occultist who literally created Lucifer Publishing, which became Lucius Trust, which is a consultancy for the UN currently. And they were the premier publishing company for the UN. And she's a disciple of Madame Blavatsky, who had Lucifer magazine. So they're not really hiding where they stand on these sort of things and what their belief systems are. But Robert Mueller created the World Core curriculum, which in the United States became Common Core. And they talk about how the goal is to put every child into a computer and to create global citizens. And unfortunately, because people don't understand the history and they're duped by, Koch money being thrown into organizations like Heritage and AFP, they think, oh, this must be conservative. We get choice. No, you already have choice. You have a God-given right to educate your children as you see fit. There's actually nothing constitutional about even compulsory education laws. There's nothing in the Constitution that stipulates that there should be any mandatory education. There's only there are state laws that say that they will provide education. That's what public education is supposed to do if you want a public education. But there should be nothing in there to mandate any education, and certainly not to force homeschoolers to be subject to government strings being attached. So, yeah, it's a
It
really
reminds me of
real
John
fun.
Taylor Gatto's work, how
Yes.
he the curriculum, the
And
yeah.
Charlotte is her beat. Yes, the
Yes,
two of them
yes.
blew the whistle on this back in the 80s, and here we are. They're ramming it through. It's really sad to watch. I found this very hard because I've been kind of screaming at the rooftop for a long time about this, and I've actually gone not just in my podcast work and in online. I've actually gone to my state capitol. I was told that I wasn't welcome back. They called me the woman in the black fur because it was winter and it was cold, and um,
Lord.
they said I wasn't allowed back because I was using big words and they didn't understand me and they didn't like that. Um, so that was fun, but I went back. They obviously can't tell me I can't come back because I use big words. That's a little, silly. So I actually confronted them though. I did call them. I called them on the phone to confront them about that. They tried denying it. No, no, no. We loved having you come talk to us. It was a little over our head, but that no, it's okay. You can come back. I'm like, yeah, that's not what I heard. But I did go back and I this really recently, and I watched them pass it, which was very, very frustrating. But now, yeah, so I have been. That's kind of been research I've been doing. But more, right now, I'm really in the midst of this Game B stuff, and now I'm trying to learn about these emerging technologies because that's where it's going to go. So with Game B, as I mentioned, when it was 2011, it's kind of this political theoretical idea. It wasn't really. It's just people with some idea, right? But now that the technology is kind of catching up to what they want to do, and you have this blueprint for network states, right? This is Vishal Srinivasan's network state concept, and this is being championed by people like Peter Thiel. And it's very interesting because I really thought that's where Game B was going to go. And I actually looked up the network states website, and they have all these companies listed as network states. And of course, like Prospera and Vitalia, these are Peter Thiel's companies. You'd expect that they would be accepted to this network state, umbrella. But Game B is actually pending approval. And when you look, it does say that Srinivasan is reviewing it. So so my theory that that's where they were trying to go seems to be on target. But when you look at the network state, and then it's just looking at all these different things and how they converge. So you had brought up my episode on the fifth industrial revolution. Most people are really familiar with the fourth industrial revolution that was popularized by the World Economic Forum. Of course, Klaus Schwab wrote his book on it. I think Elon Musk has been pretty integral to fomenting every aspect of it with all of his various companies. But they actually claim that we're already in the fifth industrial revolution. And when you think about the implications of what that really means with AI, and now we're seeing Stargate and DeepSeek. So I actually did, we have to re-upload it. It's on my Substack now, but we made the others platforms private because the audio wasn't great. But I do still have it on my Substack, and I will re-upload it onto my other platforms. But I did do a discussion. It was a live stream about DeepSeek and Stargate, Project Stargate. And China has been using like AI precision medicine for a while. They have AI hospitals, they have AI towns. And so when you start looking at what, like in the fifth industrial revolution, they keep saying how it's human centered. What does human centered mean? It means that we're feeding and programming the artificial intelligence. When they talk about general artificial intelligence, somebody has to program that. In order for it to achieve generalized artificial intelligence, it doesn't just happen on its own. Some of these research, they claim that there's sentience, and I have not seen any evidence for. That I think is just a claim, at least at this point. And if it's not, then I'm not privy to that information. But I don't really think they have sentience. But I do think that they can convince us they have sentience, and I think they can get pretty advanced, especially if the more input that is put in. And so that's really, I'm trying to figure out, because with Game B, a lot of it is about these emerging technologies on Web3 using blockchain and then hollow chains. They talk about hollow chains. That's a big concept for Game B. There's actually a company. It was called Nomap, and it's spelled NOOMAP. And
Oh, no
now it's
spare.
called S7. Yeah, and they literally say inhabiting the noosphere. That's what it was modeled. That's what it was named after, noosphere. So they now call themselves S7. They've merged with the S7 Foundation. The S7 is like the 7 S's, and a lot of this is predicated on Barbara Marx Hubbard's vision of syntony and synchronicity and synergizing. All of these cosmoerotic human terms.
Wow. I mean, this is also where the economy is going. And you brought up something in your other podcast. I know I'm jumping all around,
Yeah,
but since I'm donut in
yeah.
the aura as well is a toroidal field, which is a donut as well, the heart, which I want to hear just a little bit more about too. But you brought up something called donut
Economics.
economics. How does that play into all of this? Because I just thought I've never heard that term before.
So it goes by many terms. Donut economics is, of course, this is Kate Raworth's, explanation of it. But it's really all kind of the same thing. Circular economics, post-capitalism. In Game B, they call it a gift economy. But yeah, the UN talks about it as well. They call it degrowth is another concept, but the UN does call it donut economics, and it's this idea that everything is integrated. It's the well-being economy. They call it that as well, and it is circular. So it's redistribution is probably the most accurate. Some of them call it regenerative economics. But I guess if you want to just sum it up, this is basically communism, right? This is where we extract from some to give to others, and that they're in, and it's predicated on this Malthusian concept that there's a limited amount of resources and it's finite, and therefore we have to commodify as much as we possibly can and then redistribute everything to amongst the masses. But of course, somehow these elites just seem to be exempt from that always. I don't know where they sit on this circle, because somehow they don't have to play by the same rules, which
They're the
is always
sun. They're the
fascinating.
one. Yeah, they're this thing. They're the sun. I feel like.
Yeah, right, exactly. That's the center point. But just like, okay, maybe I'll give here and there, but the rest is all for me. Rules for thee and not for me. That seems to be the name of the game. But yeah,
So,
that's essentially what it is. And it gets very concerning when you start looking at how they want to gamify the economy and create a tokenized society. And
mm,
this is where it's just mind blowing to me, because there's a reason estate lawyers exist. Like, you would like to think that with amongst family, they could share, and, it's all warm, fuzzy, and loving, and they would love to share assets. But unfortunately, that's why we have estate lawyers, because it doesn't always work out quite like that. So now you're going to say that, like, a community of virtually strangers who just happen to be connected by some theme in a network state, that they're going to have fractal ownership of assets, and this is all going to be just hunky dory. I can't even wrap my head around how that's going to end up.
yeah, that's where it's all heading to. I was able to go to a lot of different crypto events like
Yeah,
10 years ago.
yeah.
And you can see Peter Thiel heavily invested, pretty probably created like Bitcoin and Elon. And now Elon's going to have the one app with payments. And he even just posted an article about that as well. And another thing I would like my audience to hear about, because I found this really captured the imagination with the heart, how it pulses.
Mhm.
And like this is like real science, like where like you can capture like the pulse.
Electromagnetic field, yeah.
Yeah. Can you tell us a little about that, and how I just thought it was so cool, the way you explained it. It sparked my creative, that that like it can get hijacked, or in a sense. we might have already talked about it a
A
little bit.
little bit, but yeah, so I mean, the heart does have an electromagnetic field. So this is what a lot of the concept behind heart math is predicated on. And when they say people are magnetic, they actually literally mean it. Like some people are actually more magnetic than others. Some people have a stronger electromagnetic field resonance with their heart, and some people's is longer and shorter. But on average, they say it's about 12 feet. And so we know that that is true, and that is quantifiable. We have metrics and heuristics to quantify the electromagnetic fields, particularly from the heart, but from humans in general. But now they want to, so for heart math, that's part of what they use in order to do a lot of this like biofeedback type of technology. They have, but now they're saying heart brain. So they have the neurofeedback, also neurobiofeedback, and they have the biofeedback. So some of it's based off of heart resonance, some of it is based on brainwave states. But yeah, so they have technology like the technology really ranges, and I'm really learning all about this. So I'm pretty new into a lot of this, but from what I can see, there some of the stuff that has been around for a really long time, I mean decades, is like optogenetics. So they can
Oh yeah.
use light and sound frequency to manipulate emotions and brainwave states. And so this is a way that is totally non-invasive, that they do have kind of like remote kind of an interface with humans. And we know they've done several experiments on this, and that's not new technology at all. They are also, I mean, the biosensor stuff is looks like it's a little bit newer. And that does look like that's nanotechnology stuff, and they can do remote kind of interface with. That's a lot of, so there's a lot, there's MIT is doing a lot of work on that. As you saw, Purdue University, that's where I think the crypto stuff is kind of going. It's headed in that direction.
Mm.
There also MIT, and then who's the other one? Cambridge is doing a lot of work on this biodigital convergence
Oh,
stuff as well.
that
And
goes back to the Royal Society, I believe.
yes, and Canada. So Canada is where a lot of the stuff, and MK Ultra had a big Canadian branch as well. McGill University did a lot of MK Ultra studies, but they have policy horizons, and this is kind of like that's where one of the big white papers on biodigital convergence comes from. Policy horizons out of Canada. And yeah, so I mean, it's multifaceted. It's not like there's one technology. But when they talk about this biofield stuff, there was one that I saw was super creepy, where they were talking about the quantum field, and they were talking about like using Lucifer software. I was like,
Oh
what
wow.
is this? Uh,
Yeah, I think
Lucifer,
I heard of that. Yeah.
Lucifer control software, and it's a partnership with Smithsonian and NASA.
Oh, that's scary.
I know. Like, yeah, with those players involved and a name like that. Um, but yeah,
And then they have the telescope too. I think it's called Lucifer.
they
Yeah.
do. Yes. Yes. It's like it's an acronym, like each letter stands for something, and I don't know what it stands for, but yeah.
And I know I'm jumping all around, but I want
Yeah,
to
no,
get as much
that's great.
information jam packed in here. Because we're coming up on the top of the hour. You've also done a pretty cool podcast with this guy who brought up like the Rothschilds and the butterflies and the monarch
Fascinating.
butterflies, but you've also interviewed some people that were under mind control or MK Ultra or something like that.
Mhm. Yes. I've interviewed several, my friend Kathy O'Brien is probably the most well-known. She was an MK Ultra survivor. But I've interviewed several satanic ritual abuse survivors as well. And I'm not like the premier resident on this. I mean, there are people whose like whole channels are devoted to this study. But I'm very fascinated by MK Ultra because I really don't believe that it ended. And I don't think it began with MK Ultra either. I think a lot of my research indicates that Tavistock laid the groundwork for MK Ultra. I don't think that without this Tavistock clinic that MK Ultra could have actually existed. So, and I think that a lot of the techniques really do come out of the ancient mystery cults. And I think a lot of Matt and Cynthia's work do substantiate that theory. So yeah, that whole theory about that whole story about the Rothschilds and the butterfly was fascinating. I didn't know any of that previously.
That was
Um,
cool.
that was very, very cool. But with the satanic ritual abuse survivors, it's interesting because they all do. It's like your tendency to want to discredit it because it's just so dark, but they all
Mhm.
have a similar story. So it's really hard to ignore when
Mhm.
so many people are saying the same thing over and over again. And a lot of these people, I've been very perspicacious about who I've agreed to interview. There have actually been people who, not that I don't believe them or don't wish them all the best, but because I could tell they were still in their healing journey. Not that any of us are ever. I mean, I think as humans, we're always on that journey, right? We've all
It's a
experienced trauma.
lifelong, yeah.
Yeah, I think if you're alive, you've experienced trauma of some sort and you're working through it, hopefully to the best of your ability. But I think some of them are, further behind on that journey. And when they relay their story, it's not cohesive enough to do a service to them or for the mission. So there are people who I've told I didn't think it was a good idea for that reason. And it's because I respect the I really respect what they've been through, and I want to see attention drawn to it so that, not that I think I'm going to be the one to stop it, but at least to raise the awareness so that there is a potential. But I think, I don't want to do anything that does a disservice. So,
Right, and the trauma is interesting, and I probably will leave this out. I'm just throwing out stuff I was thinking about. But how you were going, I believe it was a podcast you were in going, and I believe you said something about this about trauma going back to families and stuff like that.
yeah.
That's like you can kind of see that. And I'm Jewish, so like
Mhm.
I feel like there's a trauma like there
Oh,
in
yeah.
that, and especially like what was activated, I would say, with Kanye because he's like famous
Yes.
celebrity kind of, and then a year to the date, like the day that he's like did his like famous like anti-Semitic tweet,
Yeah.
a year to that date was October 7th. It
Hmm.
was a leap year, so the date was
Right.
8th. But it was still the 281 day. I'm all into numbers and stuff, but
The gematria.
the Montreal numerology and all that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
Um,
mhm.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, actually, a lot of studies on intergenerational trauma were done on Jews, and it is because of there's so many quantifiable, like mass scale traumatic events. I mean, the most prevalent one that comes to people's minds would be the Holocaust, but there
Right.
were many instances of mass scale persecution, and so they've done a lot of studies on intergenerational trauma with Jews, and uh, it does seem very evident. It seems like a very real thing, and I think it's with families. It's because it's so intimate. One of my best friends would always say that her mom used to say that she installed the buttons so she knows when to push them.
It's
Uh,
true. It's true. Yeah.
and that's it's kind of a funny, like, lighthearted, like addressing something that's actually pretty profound. And so I think that with trauma-based mind control, I think it's more effective when you're dealing with families. And I think that's part of why, the whole Project Monarch is obviously something that's less documented. So it's harder to provide very, definitive evidence on it. But there's a lot of preponderance of evidence, right? So And I've definitely talked to people who have experienced it, and Kathy is one of them, and her daughter as well. And she's talked quite extensively and written quite extensively. She's done a tremendous job. Um, so yeah, but I think that a lot of it is they do use families intentionally. What I've read about Project Monarch is that they were recruiting for very specific things, and the three things that they were looking for were an IQ over 120 because you're more likely to dissociate.
Oh,
Dissociative personality is a coping mechanism. It's a protective coping mechanism against trauma. But it apparently, like, over 120 is more likely to dissociate than under. But it is a neuroprotective mechanism. And then in utero trauma. So there were some instances that I've read where they induced in utero trauma, but if they could find in utero trauma, that was desirable. And then, of course, intergenerational trauma was one of the other. Those were like the top three things they were looking for Project Monarch. And again, I know it's not the most documented, so people question, like, did it even exist? Is it real? I think we obviously, we'd like to have hard documentation for everything. That's just not always viable. So, you collect the information that you have. And I think sometimes when all data points to the same direction, you kind of have to guess that might be where it's going. So,
yeah, and that's why I like to go into all different like fields of study, from creative to
mhm.
logical. And over the last few years, I've been really going into the logical, because I'm like already like so out of the box, like creative, like, oh, that's what's going on. But you could just see that there is MK Ultra like going on, and I think it's they target different groups over the last few years,
Yes.
Jewish groups, but then you had Black Lives Matter, and then you had the ICE stuff with the Mexicans, and then you have a whole worldwide one with a lockdown, and now they have all this data analytics. It's like all documented on Twitter, kind of like with the phones, our heart race. It sees our face if we're like
And now with
excited.
everybody wearing the wearables, right? Like,
Right. Yeah.
they have all this biometric data on it. But that's another thing too. So in COVID, they were doing a lot of research in COVID. It's very interesting. And they were launching a lot of things during that 2020 time period. But they had like this Project Salus thing going on, where they were in the hospitals doing these wireless body area networks. So you didn't even have to have like a wearable or an injected nano sensor. If you were in this area, then you were wirelessly connected. It was, and this was like real experiments that they were doing. So I imagine 4 years later, this is much more advanced technology. But
And see, I'm all into symbols, and so I see like the red cross right there,
oh yeah,
which is like Templar,
yep,
or the red shield, which is the name of Rothschild, and like you just see this in all the big events just pop
yeah,
up.
you do. I mean, even their little COVID like fake computerized diagram that they made with all the spikes. I mean,
Right.
that has so much imagery in it too. I mean, it's obviously like a computer graphic image. Like,
Mhm.
there's no human cell that looks like that.
Right. Yeah.
You know?
I remember I was looking into that, just trauma, just kind of looking at and like how they had that screen too, like the whole
Yeah.
time, like oh my gosh, it's getting worse. And like, I kept looking at it. I was like, oh my goodness. Well, Courtenay, I'm so grateful for this podcast. Thank you for spending the time
Likewise.
with all of us. What can we look out for from you, and where would you like people to go? I got all of Courtenay's links down below. Make sure to go subscribe to her
Mhm.
Substack for sure. I got those links. Go, and the Twitter. I mean, that Twitter is amazing. I tell everybody to go subscribe because it's absolutely incredible.
Well, thank you so much. Yeah, definitely. CourtenayTurner.com is a great place where you can find all of the various platforms that I'm on, all of my social media. I am really trying to encourage people to head on over to my Substack. I'm going to make the Substack videos. They're the first access. So you'll get my podcast first. And that means if we have technical difficulties like we did with that live stream, we did clean it up. We got it up on Substack. We have not had time to get it everywhere else. So it's been a little bit, but my Substack viewers definitely can have it. And they will be ad free. And we are going to be putting it behind a paywall. I believe it's $8 a month, and there's a founding member subscription for $240 for the year, which is a bit more. But I'm really just trying to figure out how I'm going to keep this thing going, because unfortunately I don't want a UBI, and we don't have one. So I need to figure out how to pay bills. And if people want to support the work, that would be greatly appreciated. Head on over to the Substack, become a paid member. We are also going to be launching a product. It's a skincare product. I've already said the name on the Union of the Unwanted, so I'll just share it here as well. We don't have the website up because we're still in beta sample testing phase, but it's going to be Glow with Tallow. And this is an all natural product. I'm thinking that the Maha crowd, not that I support everything they're doing, but I really support the messaging. I love the idea of making America healthy again. I love the idea of, getting all the poisons out of our food and out of our skincare. So this is a tallow product with, we have a couple of variations. We have medicinal grade Manuka honey with 20 UMF plus, and it is truly raw, like never been processed, never been heated or treated. So it's going to be Glow with Tallow. And we also have a castor oil one and a black seed oil one. So I personally love it. And I'm really picky about skincare products because I have very combination skin. So it's tricky to find the right thing, but this stuff is amazing and it's all natural. So I hope that this is going to be that people will enjoy it, and that'll help support the work that we're doing. And as far as the research, I'm going to continue to dive into this technocracy, Game B type overlap, which is the new social operating system for society, the network states, and a lot of this, emerging technologies, just trying to understand how, what is it? Because I think that what we're seeing is Trump banned the CBDCs, which is great. I predicted that would happen, though. We've had a lot of awareness, a lot of pushback. People do not want a top-down, centralized control grid currency. But I think that the alternative that's going to be presented is these decentralized, they call it DeFi type of cryptocurrencies. And they are going to be fiat currencies from what I can see in some regards. Trump's coin started out with a certain number and then ballooned, right? Which is essentially fiat currency. But even more than that, people think that you can't be locked out of a community. You absolutely can. You need a digital ID. You need a smart contract. You have your own currency within that community. What happens when you get locked out of your communitarian world or your network state? I think that's going to be a very dystopian vision for a lot of people if their whole world is locked in the metaverse.
Yeah. Isn't this cool? The sun's coming up now.
That's super cool.
Yeah, that's nice.
Are you in a high rise or?
Yeah, it's a high rise, and this is Japan. It's Tokyo.
Tokyo.
Yeah,
I've never been. I've always wanted to. When I was in 3rd grade, I tried to teach myself Japanese, and I wrote to the embassy telling them that I thought I should be Japanese.
Yeah. Well, I grew up on Pokemon, so I'm ready to go to the Pokemon and Nintendo, so I'm super excited. And this shot was cool. Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Courtenay. Very grateful for you. I'll end it, but it'll continue. I'll just do a sign out.
Sure.
Thank you so much for watching. It's DOENUT. Much love and God bless you.
Thank you.